"There is no envelope for you, Daniel." Richard Coleman's words carried across the conference hall with enough calm to make the insult feel deliberate. Daniel Hayes stood beside the last empty chair, while nearly 200 employees held white bonus envelopes in their hands. Some were smiling. Some were already whispering about mortgage payments, Christmas gifts, and overdue car repairs. Daniel held nothing. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Coffee cooled on folding tables along the wall. Somewhere near the back of the room, a printer clicked through another page, strangely loud in the silence that followed. Daniel looked at Richard. Was my performance below standard? No. Did I miss my targets? No. Then this is not about my work. Richard adjusted the cuff of his expensive navy suit. Commitment is more than numbers, Daniel. A few employees lowered their eyes. They knew what he meant. Daniel knew too. Every weekday at exactly 5 o'clock, Daniel shut down his computer, picked up his worn brown jacket, and drove 12 miles across Denver to collect his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, from after-school care. He arrived early. He worked through lunch when necessary. He answered emergencies from home after Emma went to sleep. None of that mattered to Richard. What mattered was that Daniel did not stay for optional executive dinners, evening networking events, or Saturday golf outings where ambition was measured by visibility. Everyone here made sacrifices, Richard continued. Daniel's expression remained steady. So did I. Apparently not the right ones. The room became still. Near the rear door stood a blonde woman Daniel had noticed earlier. She looked about 28, dressed professionally but without the executive badges worn by senior leadership. She had spent most of the ceremony writing in a small leather notebook. Now she stopped. Her eyes moved from Richard to Daniel. Then she quietly closed the notebook. Richard lifted the final envelope from the table and handed it to a department manager beside him. Bonuses reward people who demonstrate commitment to this company. Daniel looked around the room. He saw coworkers who had worked beside him during system failures, impossible deadlines, and late quarter emergencies. Several looked embarrassed. One woman silently mouthed, "I am sorry." Daniel gave her a small nod. He would not make her carry his humiliation. That was the thing about dignity. It did not become more valuable when someone applauded it, and it did not become less valuable when someone tried to take it away. Richard seemed disappointed that Daniel would not argue. Nothing to say? Daniel glanced at the clock. 4:52. Emma's after-school program closed at 6. Snow had begun falling beyond the tall windows, turning the Denver streets gray and white. "I have somewhere I need to be." Richard smiled. "Exactly my point." Daniel reached for his jacket. Then the blonde woman spoke from the back. "Actually, Mr. Coleman, I have a question." Heads turned. Richard frowned. "And you are?" She did not answer immediately. She opened her notebook again and looked down at something she had written. "You said bonuses are based on commitment." "That is correct." "Then why was the employee with the highest documented performance score the only person excluded?" The room went silent. Richard's smile disappeared. Daniel slowly turned toward her. He had never met this woman. He did not know why she had his performance numbers. And Richard Coleman clearly did not know who she was either. But beneath the closed notebook, embossed so faintly that almost nobody noticed it, were two words that would soon change everything. Mitchell Holdings. 3 months earlier, Daniel Hayes had already learned that 5 o'clock could tell you more about a workplace than any mission statement printed on a wall. At 4:58 each afternoon, the operations floor still buzzed with keyboards, ringing phones, and conversations drifting between rows of gray desks. At 5 exactly, Daniel saved his work, checked the overnight monitoring queue, and reached for his brown jacket. "Leaving already?" Richard Coleman asked one evening. Daniel looked toward the clock. "My work is finished. The leadership team is having drinks downstairs. I have somewhere to be." Richard smiled without warmth. "You always do." Daniel understood the message, but he refused to apologize. 12 miles away, Emma would be sitting near the front window of her after-school center with her purple backpack beside her feet, waiting for the one person who had promised to show up. Daniel had been raising her alone for 4 years. Their life was not glamorous. Breakfast was usually scrambled eggs or cereal. His pickup had more than 140,000 miles on it. Their small house outside Denver had a furnace that complained every winter. But Emma never wondered who would attend her school conference, help with multiplication homework, or sit beside her when thunderstorms kept her awake. Daniel considered that a form of success no annual review could measure. What Richard never mentioned was that Daniel arrived at 7 every morning, nearly an hour before most of the team. He had redesigned reporting processes that once consumed dozens of staff hours each week. He had corrected routing problems, documented system weaknesses, and trained junior analysts without asking for recognition. His performance reviews were excellent. His numbers were better. Only his visibility was wrong. One Friday, Richard stopped beside Daniel's desk at 4:55. Executive dinner tonight. Regional directors will be there. Daniel continued typing. I was not scheduled for it. That is not the point. What is the point? Richard leaned closer. People who want executive futures do not watch the clock. Daniel finished his final entry and closed the file. Neither does my daughter. She just knows whether I showed up. Richard stared at him. There are sacrifices involved in getting ahead. Daniel stood and put on his jacket. I know. Do you? Daniel met his eyes. I just think we disagree about who should make them. He left at 5. At 5:37, Emma spotted his pickup through the center window and ran toward the entrance with a construction paper rocket in her hands. Daddy, look. Daniel crouched as she held it up. That is impressive. It goes to Mars. That is a long commute. Emma laughed. On the drive home, she talked about planets while snow dusted the windshield and traffic crawled along Interstate 25. Daniel listened to every word. Later, after dinner and homework, Emma fell asleep on the couch with a library book against her chest. Daniel carried her to bed, tucked the blanket around her, and returned to the kitchen. His company laptop was waiting. A system alert had appeared 20 minutes earlier. Daniel opened it expecting another routine routing exception. Instead, he saw a pattern that made him sit forward. Thousands of shipments were being assigned through an outdated optimization rule. The losses were small individually, almost invisible. Together, they were enormous. Daniel pulled 6 months of records. Then 12. The kitchen grew quiet except for the refrigerator and the soft clicking of keys. At 11:43, he found the account most exposed to the error. Daniel stared at the contract value displayed on the screen. $47 million. He immediately sent a detailed warning to management. By morning, Richard's reply was waiting. 3 sentences. No urgency. No investigation. Daniel read the final line twice. Focus on your assigned responsibilities. He closed the message, looked toward Emma's bedroom, then reopened the data. Because sometimes commitment was not staying late so powerful people could see you. Sometimes it was doing the right thing when the powerful people refused to look. Daniel spent the next 4 days proving what management had told him not to investigate. He arrived before 7 each morning, worked through the routing records before his regular shift began, and continued from his kitchen table after Emma went to sleep. The pattern was worse than he first believed. A legacy optimization rule was quietly sending high-priority shipments through distribution hubs that looked cheaper on paper but created costly delays downstream. One missed connection meant little. Thousands of them meant a contract could disappear. On Thursday morning, Daniel carried a 40-page analysis into Richard Coleman's office. I verified the error. Richard barely looked up. I told you to leave that alone. The Westbridge account renews Monday. I am aware. If their weekend shipments fail the service threshold, they have grounds to walk away. Richard finally leaned back. And you believe you discovered something our consultants missed? The data discovered it. I followed it. Daniel, go back to your department. 3 sentences. 3 chances to listen. Richard took none of them. Daniel walked out without arguing. That afternoon, the first major routing failure appeared. By Friday morning, operations managers were scrambling. Trucks were being assigned inefficiently across 3 states. Delivery windows were narrowing, and Westbridge requested an emergency review. Daniel opened the temporary correction model he had already built. He could stabilize the routing logic without changing the core production system. His supervisor looked at him. Can this work? Yes. Are you sure? No system deserves that word. But I tested it 6 ways. They deployed the correction under emergency authorization. By sunset, the delayed volume was falling. By Saturday afternoon, the network had stabilized. Monday morning, Westbridge renewed the $47 million contract. Daniel arrived at 7:12 carrying coffee and Emma's forgotten permission slip in his jacket pocket. He expected questions. Instead, he heard applause coming from the executive conference room. Through the glass wall, Richard stood before several board representatives beside a presentation titled Network Recovery Initiative. Fast leadership protected one of our most important accounts, Richard said. Daniel stopped. On the screen was the routing model Daniel had built at his kitchen table. His name was nowhere on it. A junior analyst beside him whispered, "That is your work." Daniel looked through the glass. "I know. You should say something." Daniel took a slow sip of coffee. "The system is working. That is not the point." Daniel's eyes remained on the screen. "Today it is." But someone else had already noticed. That afternoon, an automated compliance review flagged the recovery because emergency changes required a complete audit trail. The digital record showed every revision, every timestamp, and every user credential. Richard had presented the solution. Daniel had created it. That was the first twist Richard never anticipated. Software did not care who had the larger office. It remembered who touched the truth. 2 days later, Daniel received a strange internal message from an account labeled Operational Review. It contained only one sentence: "Do not alter your original files." Daniel stared at it, then checked the sender information. Most identifying fields were restricted, but one tiny authorization code remained visible: MH01. He wrote it on a yellow sticky note and slipped it beneath his keyboard. That evening, Emma was drawing at the kitchen table while Daniel made grilled cheese sandwiches. "What does MH mean?" she asked. Daniel turned. She was holding the sticky note. "Probably nothing important." Emma studied the letters. "Maybe it means make home." Daniel laughed softly. "That sounds better." She stuck the note onto the refrigerator beneath a drawing of their little house. Daniel forgot about it. Weeks later, when a quiet blonde woman walked into headquarters carrying a leather notebook embossed with Mitchell Holdings, those same initials would finally make sense. But the deeper meaning of that yellow note would take much longer to reveal, because Daniel did not yet know that the most important office he would ever be given would eventually stop being an office at all. Lauren Mitchell arrived at headquarters on a Monday morning, carrying one leather notebook and no announcement. She wore a simple navy coat over professional clothes, her blonde hair falling neatly past her shoulders, and the temporary badge clipped near her waist identified her only as Operational Review. No executive title, no special escort, no reason for most employees to look twice. That was exactly how Lauren wanted it. She had spent years watching reports reach Mitchell Holdings polished until every uncomfortable truth disappeared beneath charts and percentages. This time, she wanted to see the company before the company knew she was looking. At 8:20, Lauren stopped beside the reception desk when the scheduling system froze. The receptionist sighed. "Not again." Daniel was passing with coffee when he noticed. "Give me 30 seconds. "You are not information technology," the receptionist said. "Neither is the problem." Daniel leaned toward the monitor, corrected a permissions conflict, and restarted the application. "Try it now." The schedule appeared. "You are a lifesaver." "No. I changed one setting." Lauren watched him continue walking without waiting for praise. 20 minutes later, she found him helping a junior analyst understand a routing exception. Before lunch, he showed a warehouse supervisor why a dashboard was displaying yesterday's inventory count. Each time, Daniel explained the problem without making the other person feel foolish. Each time, he returned to his own desk without mentioning it. Lauren wrote 3 words in her notebook: competence without theater. Near noon, she approached Daniel's workstation. "Daniel Hayes." He looked up. "Yes." "Lauren, Operational Review." She offered her hand. "I have questions about the Westbridge recovery." Daniel's expression changed slightly. "You should probably speak with Mr. Coleman." "I did." "Then you have the executive version." Lauren pulled out a chair. "I would like the version the audit trail remembers." Daniel studied her for a moment. "What do you want to know?" "Who built the correction model?" "I did." "Who tested it?" "My supervisor and I." "Who presented it to the board?" Daniel paused. "Mr. Coleman." Lauren waited for anger. None came. "Why did you not challenge him?" she asked. Daniel looked toward the operations floor. "Westbridge stayed. People kept their jobs. The system worked." "That does not answer my question." "It does for me." Lauren closed her notebook halfway. "Most people would want credit. Credit is useful when it helps you do better work. Otherwise, it is mostly noise." For the first time that morning, Lauren smiled. At 4:58, she was still observing from an empty workstation when Daniel began shutting down his computer. Richard appeared almost immediately. "Another early departure?" Daniel glanced at the wall clock. "It is 5 o'clock. Some of us are staying for the quarterly planning session." "I was not invited." People with initiative do not wait for invitations. Daniel put on his jacket. My daughter is waiting for me. Richard looked toward Lauren, apparently hoping the observer would appreciate his point. This is what I mean. Talent is not enough without commitment. Lauren said nothing. Daniel simply nodded. Good night, Mr. Coleman. After he left, Richard turned to her. Capable analyst. Limited executive potential. Lauren opened her notebook. Because he leaves when his workday ends? Because leadership requires sacrifice. Lauren wrote something down. Richard tried to read it, but she closed the cover. Interesting. That evening, Lauren remained alone on the operations floor until nearly 7. She reviewed Daniel's attendance records. He averaged more weekly hours than several employees Richard considered leadership material. She reviewed the Westbridge files. Daniel's warnings had been sent days before the failure. She reviewed the emergency recovery. Every critical correction led back to him. Then she opened the preliminary bonus recommendation prepared by Human Resources. Daniel Hayes was ranked first in his division. Lauren leaned back slowly. Something was wrong. Before closing the file, she noticed another document scheduled for executive approval the following morning. The file name looked ordinary. Year-end bonus final revision. Lauren opened it. Daniel's name was still there, highlighted at the top. Beside it was a blank approval field reserved for Richard Coleman. Lauren closed her laptop without changing a thing. She did not need to interfere yet. Sometimes the clearest measure of character was not what someone did while being watched. It was what they chose when they believed nobody with power was in the room. Lauren returned before sunrise the next morning. Denver was still dark beyond the office windows, and only a few desk lamps glowed across the nearly empty floor. She opened the bonus file first. Daniel Hayes was gone. Not moved lower. Not reduced. Deleted. Lauren checked the revision history. The change had been made at 6:42 the previous evening under Richard Coleman's executive credentials. She opened the original Human Resources recommendation. Daniel had earned the highest performance score in his division, exceeded every measurable target, and received the strongest peer evaluations on his team. His recommended bonus was also the largest. Lauren compared both files, then found a management note Richard had added beside Daniel's employee record. Insufficient executive commitment. Limited after-hours visibility. Lauren stared at the words. At 7:12, Daniel arrived carrying coffee in one hand and a paper bag in the other. He stopped at the reception desk and placed the bag beside the receptionist. Blueberry muffin. You said yesterday was terrible. She smiled. You remembered? Hard to forget someone threatening a scheduling system before 9 in the morning. Lauren watched from across the floor. Daniel did not know his bonus had disappeared overnight. He did not know she had seen the change. He simply sat down and began working. By 10, Lauren had found something worse. Richard's quarterly executive report described the Westbridge recovery as a leadership initiative developed under his direct supervision. Attached to the report were screenshots from Daniel's model, stripped of their original author metadata. Lauren opened the audit archive. The timestamps told a different story. Daniel had warned management first. Daniel had built the correction. Daniel had tested the solution. Richard had dismissed the warning, then claimed the result. Lauren printed both records and placed them inside her leather notebook. At lunch, she found Daniel alone in the break room eating a turkey sandwich while reviewing Emma's school calendar on his phone. Big plans? Lauren asked. Daniel smiled. Winter concert, Thursday. You are going? Front row if traffic cooperates. Even if something happens here. Daniel set down his sandwich. If something truly needs me, I will handle it. But my daughter has been practicing one song for 6 weeks. To her, that is something happening too. Lauren sat across from him. Do you ever worry people mistake that for a lack of ambition? They already do. Does it bother you? Daniel thought for a moment. Sometimes. Then why not prove them wrong? He looked toward the window, where snow drifted past the glass. If I spend my life proving myself to people who already decided who I am, Emma gets whatever is left of me. Lauren said nothing. Daniel returned to his sandwich. The answer stayed with her all afternoon. At 4:30, Richard entered the conference room with Human Resources and approved the final bonus list. Lauren watched through the glass. He signed each page without hesitation. When he reached Daniel's division, he paused for less than 3 seconds before signing again. That was all. 3 seconds to turn years of good work into a punishment for being a father. Lauren could have walked inside and stopped him. She did not. Not because she agreed, but because she needed the truth documented completely. Richard needed to believe the choice belonged entirely to him. Later, after the office emptied, Lauren reviewed one final record and discovered the decision was even more deliberate than she thought. Richard had not merely removed Daniel's bonus. He had redistributed the money across several executive bonuses, including his own. Lauren closed the file. On the desk beside her sat the yellow sticky note Daniel had accidentally left behind after moving keyboards during a system check. MH01. Beneath the code, in a child's uneven handwriting, were two words Daniel had apparently added later after Emma's joke: make home. Lauren ran one finger along the edge of the paper, then placed it carefully inside her notebook. For the first time, she knew exactly what she was going to do. But she would wait until the bonus ceremony, because justice delivered too early could be dismissed as disagreement. Justice delivered after the truth revealed someone's character could change an entire room. By the time the bonus ceremony began, Daniel had already decided he would leave quietly if his name was not called. He did not know why he felt uneasy. Human Resources had never told him he was receiving anything, and he had learned not to build expectations around corporate promises. Still, as employee after employee walked forward to collect a white envelope, something about the room felt wrong. Richard Coleman stood beneath the company logo with the confidence of a man certain he controlled both the story and the audience. Melissa Grant. Applause. Kevin Parker. More applause. Thomas Reed. Another envelope changed hands. Daniel remained near the last empty chair. Across the room, Lauren stood beside the rear doors with her leather notebook held against her waist. Richard had barely acknowledged her that morning. To him, she was still an operational reviewer whose report could be managed later. Then the final name was called. It was not Daniel's. Richard placed the remaining papers on the table. Daniel waited several seconds before speaking. There is no envelope for me? Richard looked directly at him. There is no envelope for you, Daniel. The room quieted. Was my performance below standard? No. Did I miss my targets? No. Daniel nodded once. Then this is not about my work. Richard adjusted his cuff. Commitment is more than numbers. Several employees looked down. Daniel could feel embarrassment moving through the room, but strangely, very little of it belonged to him. He thought of Emma sitting at the kitchen table practicing her song. He thought of the evenings he had refused to trade for drinks with executives who might never remember his daughter's name. Richard continued. Everyone here understands that success requires sacrifice. Daniel met his eyes. It does. Richard waited. Daniel finished quietly. You just do not get to decide who I sacrifice. No one moved. Richard's expression hardened. Your daughter is not the issue. Then do not make being her father one. A woman near Daniel's department slowly lowered her envelope. Richard glanced around the room and seemed to realize he was losing something more valuable than control of the conversation. Perhaps this proves my point, he said. Maybe you are simply not executive material. Daniel reached for his jacket. He had nothing left to prove. That was when Lauren spoke. Interesting. One word. Calm. Almost gentle. Yet it stopped Daniel before he reached the aisle. Richard turned toward her. Excuse me. Lauren stepped away from the wall. I said that is interesting. This is an internal compensation matter. Yes, Lauren replied. I know. She opened her notebook. Especially the part where Mr. Hayes originally ranked first in his division. Richard's face changed. Those records are confidential. So is the revision history showing his name was deleted at 6:42 last Tuesday evening. A murmur passed through the room. Daniel stared at her. Richard took a step toward the stage microphone. I do not know what authority you think you have here. Lauren remained still. Enough to know his bonus was redistributed. Richard said nothing. Enough to know part of it increased your own. Silence. Real silence now. Not embarrassment. Not curiosity. The kind that arrives when everyone realizes the story they were given is beginning to collapse. Richard looked toward Human Resources. This meeting is over. Not yet, Lauren said. The rear doors opened behind her. A gray-haired attorney Daniel had seen only in company newsletters entered with 2 members of the board. Richard's confidence faltered. What is this? Lauren closed her notebook and handed it to the attorney. Then she looked at Daniel, not with pity, but with respect. Mr. Hayes, your daughter is not evidence that you lack commitment. Daniel did not answer. Lauren turned back toward Richard. And before you dismiss another employee for failing your personal definition of sacrifice, there is something about me you should probably know. The attorney stepped beside her. Richard went pale. Lauren reached for the temporary operational review badge clipped at her waist, removed it, and placed it on the table beside the last empty chair. Lauren placed the temporary badge on the table and looked toward the gray-haired attorney. He stepped forward without raising his voice. For anyone who has not met her formally, this is Lauren Mitchell, chairwoman of Mitchell Holdings and majority owner of this company. No one applauded. No one whispered. The room simply stopped. Richard stared at Lauren as if the woman he had ignored for weeks had become someone else in a single sentence. She had not. Only his understanding of her had changed. Daniel recognized the name immediately. Mitchell Holdings. The leather notebook. The authorization code. MH01. You are the owner? Richard finally asked. Yes. Why was I not informed you were conducting a review? Lauren's expression remained calm. Because I wanted to see how people were treated when you believed ownership was not watching. Richard glanced toward the board members. There is context here. Good, Lauren said. Then context should help. She nodded to the attorney. The large presentation screen behind Richard changed. A timeline appeared showing the Westbridge account failure, Daniel's original warning, management's response, the emergency correction, and the final contract renewal. Daniel's name appeared beside timestamp after timestamp. Mr. Hayes identified the routing problem 4 days before the operational failure, Lauren said. He submitted a documented warning. Richard straightened. His analysis was preliminary. The next record appeared. Richard's message filled the screen. Focus on your assigned responsibilities. Several employees shifted uncomfortably. Lauren continued. When the risk became real, Mr. Hayes had already built and tested a correction model. That model stabilized the network and helped preserve a contract worth $47 million. Daniel looked around the room. People who had known pieces of the story were now seeing all of it together. Lauren turned another page in her notebook. 3 days later, an executive performance report described that recovery as an initiative developed under your direct supervision. Richard's voice tightened. Leadership is responsible for departmental outcomes. Responsibility and authorship are different things. Another document appeared. The original metadata was restored. Daniel Hayes. Created. Modified. Tested. The truth had been sitting inside the system the entire time, waiting for someone willing to read it. Richard looked toward Daniel. Why did you never correct the record? Daniel answered quietly. You never asked. That sentence landed harder than accusation. Lauren changed the screen again. This time the original year-end bonus recommendation appeared. Daniel's name sat at the top of his division. Highest performance score, Lauren said. Highest peer evaluation. Highest recommended bonus. Then the revised file appeared beside it. Daniel's name was gone. The revision history shows Mr. Coleman removed him personally. Richard looked toward human resources. Compensation decisions are executive discretion. They are, Lauren said, until they become retaliation disguised as performance judgment. She displayed the redistribution record. A portion of Daniel's removed bonus had increased Richard's executive pool. The room went quiet again. Daniel did not smile. He did not look victorious. He looked tired. Lauren noticed. Mr. Coleman, effective immediately, your executive access is suspended pending an independent board review. Richard stared at her. You cannot seriously be putting all of this on one analyst's word. Lauren shook her head. I am not. She gestured toward the screen. I am putting it on yours. The audit records remained glowing behind him. Richard had written the messages. Richard had approved the revisions. Richard had signed the reports. There was nowhere for the truth to go except forward. Lauren then turned toward Daniel. Mr. Hayes, I owe you something this company should have given you before today. Daniel glanced at the envelopes. I am not asking for a bonus. I know. Lauren reached into her coat pocket and removed a small brass key attached to a plain black tag. Richard recognized it before Daniel did. His eyes widened. Lauren, that is your executive office. She looked at him, then back at Daniel. Yes, she said. And tomorrow morning, it belongs to someone else. Daniel looked at the brass key in Lauren's hand, but did not reach for it. Around him, nearly 200 employees remained silent, their bonus envelopes forgotten. Richard Coleman stared at Lauren as though the key represented something far larger than an office. In a way, it did. I do not understand, Daniel said. Lauren stepped closer. Starting tomorrow, I am appointing you acting director of operational integrity. Daniel blinked. You are promoting me? I am giving you responsibility you have already demonstrated. Richard found his voice. This is absurd. He is a systems analyst. Lauren turned toward him. He identified a $47 million risk before your leadership team did. That does not make him an executive. No, Lauren said calmly. Character does. 3 sentences. Then nothing. The silence around Richard seemed heavier than any argument could have been. Lauren faced Daniel again and held out the key. The office is mine when I work from this headquarters. Beginning tomorrow, you will use it. Daniel glanced toward the glass-walled executive corridor overlooking downtown Denver. He had walked past those offices hundreds of times without imagining himself behind one of the doors. Why your office? He asked. Lauren's expression softened. Because authority should go where responsibility already lives. Richard shook his head. You are giving him your office? Lauren looked directly at him. No, I am giving the responsibility to the person who already earned it. Daniel finally accepted the key. It felt surprisingly ordinary in his palm. Small, cool, brass. Nothing about it could return the mornings he had arrived early, the evenings spent fixing problems from his kitchen table, or the moments when people mistook fatherhood for weakness. Yet it represented something Daniel had never demanded, respect without having to abandon who he was to receive it. Lauren then turned toward human resources. Restore Mr. Hayes' original bonus recommendation. The redistribution will be reversed pending review. Daniel looked at her. Lauren. She paused. I appreciate that. But there is something more important. What? Daniel glanced around at his coworkers. Do not fix only what happened to me. Lauren studied him. Explain. If the system lets one manager punish an employee for having responsibilities outside this building, then another manager can do it again. Several employees looked up. Daniel continued. Parents, caregivers, anyone who does excellent work but cannot stay late just to be seen staying late. Lauren's eyes moved slowly across the room. What would you change? I would start by measuring work instead of theater. A few people smiled. Lauren did too. Then perhaps you should. Daniel looked down at the key again. For the first time, he understood that the office was not really a reward. It was a test. Power could expose character just as easily as humiliation could. The ceremony ended quietly. Employees approached Daniel one by one, but he accepted their congratulations without celebrating Richard's fall. At 5:12, Daniel looked at the clock and suddenly reached for his phone. Emma. Lauren glanced over. After school care? Her winter concert. Daniel's face changed. It starts at 6. Snow was already thickening outside. Lauren checked the time. Then why are you still here? Daniel looked toward the key in his hand. I thought there might be paperwork. Tomorrow. But the new position will still exist tomorrow. Daniel hesitated. Lauren smiled. Go be where you promised to be. 40 minutes later, Daniel slipped into the front row of Emma's school auditorium just before the curtain opened. Emma spotted him beneath the stage lights and smiled so brightly that every difficult moment of the day seemed suddenly small. Daniel closed his hand around the brass key in his pocket. He had been given the largest office he had ever entered, but sitting in a folding chair beneath paper snowflakes, watching his daughter sing, he knew exactly which seat mattered more. The next morning, Daniel unlocked Lauren's executive office for the first time. On the enormous desk sat his restored bonus envelope, a new identification badge, and the yellow sticky note Emma had written on weeks earlier. Make home. Daniel stared at those 2 words longer than anything else in the room. Then he looked through the glass wall at the employees arriving below, many of them parents carrying the same invisible responsibilities he carried every day, and an idea began quietly taking shape. 3 months later, Lauren returned to the Denver headquarters expecting to find Daniel behind the enormous desk she had given him. Instead, she opened the executive office and stopped. The desk was gone. The leather chairs were gone. The framed corporate photographs had disappeared from the walls. In their place stood 6 small tables, shelves filled with books, a row of colorful backpacks, 2 computers for homework, and a quiet reading corner beneath the windows. Paper stars hung from the ceiling. A handwritten sign near the door read after schoolroom. Lauren slowly stepped inside. Daniel. A woman supervising several children pointed toward the operations floor. He is downstairs. Lauren found him exactly where she should have expected. Daniel sat at a regular desk among his team, reviewing a routing dashboard while two junior analysts stood beside him. He looked up. "You are back. Apparently, I am also missing an office." Daniel smiled. "Technically, I submitted the facilities request. You converted my executive office into childcare space. After-school space. That distinction saves you." "I was hoping." Lauren tried not to smile. "Why, Daniel?" He leaned back and looked through the glass wall toward the room upstairs. Emma sat at one of the tables doing math homework beside three other children. "Because that office proved something once," he said. "It does not need to prove it every day." Lauren said nothing. Daniel continued. "We had employees leaving early because childcare fell through. Others were paying late pickup fees. Some were turning down projects because one unexpected schedule change could ruin their week. And your solution was to surrender the largest office on this floor?" It was mostly empty. Lauren looked at him for a long moment. 3 months earlier, Richard had believed leadership meant being seen after everyone else went home. Daniel had quietly changed the definition. The independent review had removed Richard from his position and corrected several compensation policies. Daniel's appointment had become permanent. Yet he still arrived early, still left when Emma needed him, and still drove the same high-mileage pickup. Authority had changed what he could do. It had not changed who he was. "Come upstairs," Lawrence said. "There is something you should see." Daniel followed her back to the converted room. Several employees were arriving to pick up their children. A warehouse supervisor knelt beside his son. A payroll specialist helped her daughter zip a winter coat. Ordinary moments filled a room once designed to impress important visitors. Lauren handed Daniel a folder. The board reviewed the pilot program. Daniel opened it. Approved. Company-wide. He looked up. All locations. Every major United States office over the next 18 months. Daniel stared at the page. Lauren smiled. "There is one detail you may object to." He turned the page. Across the top was the program's official name, the Hayes Promise. Daniel looked at her. "No. I expected that." "Lauren, this should not have my name on it." The board disagreed. "Why?" Lauren glanced toward Emma, who was taping the old yellow sticky note onto the wall. "Make home. Because you reminded this company what commitment actually means." Daniel lowered the folder. "That does not make it mine." "You are right." Lauren's voice softened. "It belongs to every parent who ever felt guilty for leaving on time." Daniel looked around the room, and for once he had no answer. Then Emma ran toward him holding another sheet of paper. "Daddy, Miss Lauren said I could show you now." Daniel unfolded it. It was a copy of the original proposal Lauren had submitted to the board months earlier, dated before the bonus ceremony. His eyes moved to the final paragraph and stopped. Lauren had not come to Denver merely to investigate Richard. Mitchell Holdings had already been searching for someone to lead a company-wide workplace reform initiative, and Daniel's name had appeared repeatedly in anonymous employee surveys long before Lauren ever met him. Coworkers had described the same man again and again. The one who stayed calm, shared credit, solved problems, and never made anyone feel small. Daniel looked at Lauren. "You knew about me before you arrived?" "I knew the name," she said. "I came to find out whether the man matched it." Daniel glanced at Emma, then at the room he had unknowingly imagined from a child's joke on a yellow note. The bonus had never been the real test. Neither had the office. Lauren had spent weeks watching what Daniel would do when he believed nobody important was watching him, only to discover what his coworkers already knew. The quietest man in the building had been leading them long before anyone gave him a title.